in the action scenes just took me right out of the film, because it was so stylized and so obviously like all computer generated, and it could have something to do. I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt a little bit that it could have something to do with the way that I was watching it. I was watching it on a very good television, but on DVD. So it was a DVD in a Blu-ray player on a really high definition screen, and so maybe it was something about the way that picture transferred. But I was not impressed with the way that, especially like the big action scenes looked, and so I don't know. I feel like I'm opening myself up maybe for a little bit of blowback on this, but I feel like there's this. I feel like there's this pressure behind this movie that we have to like it.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Like it's the first female-led superhero movie. It's directed by a woman, and we hail this as a masterful achievement because of course we do. Because it's the first female-led superhero movie directed by a woman. And so any criticism that we might otherwise be able to justly level against this movie is automatically ripe or a target of opportunity to dismiss as just being sexist.
Right. It almost feels like it's not politically correct to have any issues with the film.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's kind of how I perceive the mood surrounding this film, because I watched a couple of reviews, or I watched one review and read a couple of other things, but the reviewer, in terms of how he usually, deals with films, he basically raved about this movie. But but he didn't really say anything good in detail about this movie. All that he did was say, "Oh wow, it's so much better than all the rest of the DCEU." And and yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is a far better film than any of the other DC movies, because all of those things are terrible. I have not enjoyed watching any of those other movies. And honestly, like, and some of the weakest parts of Wonder Woman was where it was actively trying to tie into that stuff. This would be a much better movie for me if it didn't have to tie in with the rest of the DCEU, because the frame, at the beginning of the end of the movie where she's in the present and just sort of ruminating on all of this stuff, that's totally unnecessary. And it's only there to lead you by the nose to the connective tissue with the other movies.
Yeah.
I
agree.
I think I would probably like this movie better if it weren't related to the other DC movies at all. But I probably would still have my stylistic objections to it.
Gripes, right.
I thought that, and in terms of like, sort of really geeky objections to it, I wished that her power set had been a lot better defined. Because I don't for a single second understand why she could like do the Yoda Force Lightning maneuver on Ares at the end of that, or why Ares was wielding lightning in the first place. I mean, that's kind of Zeus's jam. And so
that boss fight was nonsensical, man. Nonsensical.
It was absolutely nonsense. Yeah. And then, okay, so here's another super issue that I have. As far as the juxtaposition of like objectifying the male character, that's fine. Yeah, we'll play that for the laughs, and I got a chuckle out of that too. but I did not feel that the implied sex between them did anything at all for the story. I didn't feel like it was earned, and it didn't have any, ramifications moving forward. Like they didn't seem to have a greater emotional connection, at any point in the film after that, except maybe at the end. But in terms of the way that this emotional arc plays out, I felt like the drama was far better earned. For instance, in Captain America, I was way more invested in the relationship between Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter, and was far more moved by their final moments speaking together than I was at the end of Wonder Woman. It didn't resonate with me at all.
Mm-hmm. I thought that their relationship as a whole resonated, but the emotional response that Wonder Woman had to his sacrifice, spoilers, was not, it wasn't earned. I completely agree with you, and I don't think that their implied sexual relationship helped with that. So while I enjoyed both actors and I enjoyed the relationship they had, I do believe that their attachment was forced.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that the potential lovemaking on the boat as being shoehorned as a way to.
Oh, see, I wasn't talking about the boat
connection.
I wasn't talking about the boat.
Okay.
I didn't. I don't think anything did happen on the
It's after
boat.
the
It was
party.
after the party, right? Yeah.
No, you're right. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. No, the whole awkward, the awkwardness on the boat was hilarious. Like I like that. It was like, oh no, if you want to fine. Oh no, I don't. Like that was pretty great. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yep. I also enjoy just totally different observation. I enjoy seeing World War I represented on film ever, because most people don't touch it. Most stories don't. It's not the most frankly, it's not the most well-researched or understood conflict.
Well, it's really
so
difficult.
Much more familiar.
It's really difficult to understand World War I well, because it was such a boondoggle of crazy chaos. And in that way, I think thematically, it makes a lot of sense for this movie to sort of superimpose the involvement of a god of war who just is interested in sowing chaos into that narrative versus the World War II backdrop that has traditionally in the comics been the realm that Wonder Woman sort of emerges onto.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the source material. I agree that the God of War stuff was compelling. I just didn't think the end was all that well realized. Her emotional response to Chris Pine's sacrifice wasn't well earned, and neither was the revelation that the creepy British actor who is always a bad guy whenever he's cast he was a bad guy all along. That revelation was also.
That's not true. Professor Lupin is totally a good guy.
All right. See, you're talking to the non-Harry Potter fan in the room. Sorry.
Oh, wah, wah,
My bad.
wah.
I know. Total womp womp. Apologies to anyone listening.
That's right. You had so many Harry Potter fans just yelling into their iPods right now. That was funny.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway.
Tear me up.
Yeah. No. He does definitely play the creepy guy very well. And Beth and I, when I was watching the movie with my wife, and we both came to the conclusion pretty early that he was actually the villain and not the German guy.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah. Again, it is far and away much better than the rest of the DCEU, but admittedly, that's a fairly low bar.
I'm glad to get the opportunity to talk about this with you. I'm glad you got a chance to see it. I think it's totally fair to criticize this film. I think it's very important to. I saw some interviews with. I want to say I read. Well, I recall hearing the director say, or. No, it was a commentator. Wow, you can edit this audio as much as you want, because I'm just stumbling all over what I can remember and what I can't, apparently. But somebody somewhere said, "Oh, a woman made a mediocre
That's okay.
comic book-based film?
Yeah.
Join the club, right? Like, let's talk about it. That's fine. There are plenty of better and worse films."
Oh, since I am talking to you, and since you've mentioned your music, I would love to give you the opportunity to talk to the audience about your music just a little bit, and where we can find it, and what that's all about.
Oh, sure. A couple years ago, I released a mostly instrumental album with my band. The band was called Old Worlds, and you can find that music on Bandcamp. The web address you're looking for is oldworlds.bandcamp.com. It fits into a musical genre, mostly, most people define it as post-rock or math rock. So there's some playing with time signatures, there's some playing with musical textures. It's not straight up rock. It's just kind of mood music. Most people listen to it in that way. And I'm currently working.
So this is actually cool. Sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
I'll ask
Sure.
the question. Well, what is, because I've heard this term, what is math rock? Can you define that for me?
I hate having to. I love talking about it, but I hate trying to justify what music journalists choose to call music. Math rock came out of a fusion of hardcore rock and jazz back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was...
Oh, wow.
It was an attempt to artsy up the rock scene, because these, rock musicians are capable of counting to 5 and 7 and 13 and changing time signatures on a dime just like classical or jazz musicians can. So why not do that too, rather than having all rock music be in 4/4? So that's all it is. All math rock is just having different time signatures and being able to count to odd numbers like 7. Yep. And post rock is notable because it is instrumental music made with the rock and roll instrumentation. So you take your bass and drums and guitar and sometimes keyboards and synthesizers, and you make what sounds to most people like film soundtrack music. Most notably, the music from the TV show Friday Night Lights is by an incredible band called Explosions in the Sky. So, there you go.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep.
Sorry, what else were you about to say about your music?
Oh, just getting a new solo project off the ground. The only thing I have up for it right now is a Facebook page and a SoundCloud page under the name Quorian. Quorian. And that name comes from Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, which is another thing that you and I could talk about at some point.
That is something that we should definitely talk about at some point. But since we've already been talking for an hour, I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up.
Sweet.
Dude, I always love talking to you, and I'm excited to have you on again. I think we could easily, I'm sure, talk for an hour about Sandman, and I think that'd be great. But this has been, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you. I'm glad you were able to make it. This is Two Geek Soup. You can talk to us on Twitter at Two Geek Soup. We're on Facebook. The Facebook page is 2 Geek Soup. The email is 2geeksoup@gmail.com. And even though it probably means that I am the ill-prepared substitute teacher, this podcast is a proud member of the More Than One Lesson faculty.